during that time, each year, have you performed autopsy examinations?
Correct.
Oh, no. Okay, that's fair. Thank you. Thank you for clearing up.
Approximately how many autopsies do you perform in a given year, Dr. Ortiz?
About 300 a year.
Okay, and do a number of those cases, do they deal with violent deaths?
Correct.
And do they also include deaths that were caused by another human being as a result of physical altercation?
Yes.
Okay. You've been declared an expert witness in forensic pathology in Oakland County courts prior to today?
Yes.
And that's been done many times, correct?
Yes.
Have you also testified in other counties or federal court and things of that nature?
Yes.
All right. Your Honor, without going any further at the preliminary examination, I would move to declare Dr. Ortiz as an expert witness in forensic pathology and ask that he be declared as such.
No objection, Judge.
I will say mine.
Thank you. May I approach the witness?
You may.
Dr. Ortiz, did you perform an autopsy on one Matthew Wegson?
Yes.
And by law, did you create an autopsy protocol, which I'm showing you as Exhibit 6 for this case?
Yes. This is a copy of the autopsy protocol, and it's 9 stages, including the toxicology.
All right, thank you. Your Honor, I believe we will have a stipulation as to the admission of Exhibit 6, and I'll go forward to move things along from there.
Correct, Judge.
That is correct?
That is, Judge.
Thank you. Exhibit 6 shall be admitted.
Dr. Ortiz, in case Her Honor would like to follow along, would you please provide Exhibit 6 to the court? Thank you very much, Your Honor. Thank you, Dr. Ortiz. Sir, Mr. Wegson was pronounced dead on September 3rd in the morning at St. John Providence Hospital, correct?
Yes.
And within that day, he was brought to the Oakland County Medical Examiner's office?
Yes.
And did you perform an autopsy on September 4th in the morning of Mr. Wegson?
Yes.
Okay. Regarding your autopsy, how did
supervision? We take the organs out and examine them.
Okay, so in this case you began with the external examination of Mr. Wegson and then ultimately did the internal examination, correct?
Correct.
And in doing both of those, you were seeking the cause and manner of death in this case?
Yes.
Okay. Did you sign some evidence of injury still existing to the outside of Mr. Wegson's face, such as near the right temple by the right side of the right eye?
Yes.
Okay, and that evidence of injury was still present, correct?
Yes.
And would injury to that location consistent with a forceful running physical punch with a hard blow be consistent with causing an injury in that location that could be significant to a human being?
Yes, it's possible.
Okay. And in this case, did you, in conducting your examination of Mr. Wegson, did you find some evidence of injury as it relates to his head area?
Yes. At the time of examining the inside of the brain, I mean the head, there was some subdural hemorrhage. He already had a craniotomy. Craniotomy is the opening of the head to evacuate the clots that were there as a subdural hemorrhage.
Okay. And the subdural hemorrhage was on the right side of the brain, is that correct?
Objection.
Left.
Referring to page 3 of your report, Doctor, could you look at that under evidence of injury, sir?
Yes. Yes. That is the right side of the brain.
Okay. And what is a gel patch on the dura of the left hemisphere? What is that referring to?
When they do surgery, in order to suppress the bleeding, they put a gel that retain those clots, and there is no bleeding, and hopefully to stop complete bleeding.
Okay. What are the contra
in the other side, and sometimes in between the brain.
and that's what was found in addition to other things in this case?
Yes.
And does it have to be a very strong impact or blow to cause contracoup, to cause that contracoup to the point that it causes injury? Does it have to be a strong blow to do that to somebody?
Yes, for instance, a fall after the punch in the face came down and hit the floor that is hard, then can suffer those contracoup contusions.
Okay, so it can be either the blow itself or the fall to the surface that can cause that, correct?
Yes, it's possible that way.
All right. And what are shearing injuries of the white matter?
Shearing injuries is when there is a moving of the head. There is inside of the brain some bleeding, and is the name that we call those.
Okay, and how about frontal deep contusions of the frontal lobes?
This is what I was explaining, that the impact was in the anterior side of the face, or I mean the head, and then when the impact was given, there was suffering some abrasions on the anterior surface of the brain.
Dr. Ortiz, were you able to determine the cause as it relates to a pathological diagnosis that Mr. Wegson suffered here? What was the cause of his death?
The cause of his death was blunt force head trauma and complications thereof.
Okay. And your complications, those are all listed in your autopsy, correct, essentially?
Correct.
All right. So that included a subdural hemorrhage in this case that he suffered?
Yes.
All right. And that also had the brain contusions, which you've already described?
Yes.
And what is a partial thrombosis of the sinus? Is that superior sinus? Is that the one that runs across the top of the skull?
Yes.
Okay.
What happens is that when somebody is lying in bed for a long time, has tendency to have these complications of clotting of blood. And sometimes because of the trauma plus the being in bed, they develop this thrombosis of these vessels that are on the top of the brain, and that is when I describe it as a complication.
Okay. And is that also with bronchial pneumonia, is that also a complication as well as being in the hospital for a long period of time?
What happened, this bronchopneumonia, is that when somebody is in ventilator, it's difficult to control the secretions. So those secretions go inside into the lung and create this bronchopneumonia that is an infection of the lungs due to all the bacteria that are in the secretions that go into the lungs, secondary to being in bed.
You're aware that Mr. Wiggin in this case never left the hospital after he was taken there by ambulance after he was assaulted, correct?
Yes.
And were you also aware that he was in a coma for approximately 8 days
Yes.
right after the assault?
Yes.
And when someone is in a coma, that's when they need the ventilator and things of that nature so they can breathe or so they can attempt to keep them alive?
Yes, once somebody is unconscious, sometimes they start having noisy breathing. So in order to avoid choking with the secretions and everything, they put the connections for the ventilator, and this way they keep the person alive.
And then the pulmonary edema, sir?
The pulmonary edema is when the heart is giving up too much time in that position, and plus the pneumonia increases the chances of accumulating fluids in the lungs.
And that's a result of being in a hospital bed, for example, with a severe injury for an extended period of time?
Yes.
And then how about the pulmonary embolism due to the vessels in the legs for Mr. Wegson.
This is the final complication that actually killed this person. What happened is that people that are in bed for a long time, one of the worst problems is that they develop clotting of the blood, and these clots usually develop in the lower extremities for lack of moving. And when the person move to change or to do different activities for the treatment, these clots goes from the legs into the lung. This particular case, they put a green filter in the inferior vena cava, filter to avoid those clots coming to the lungs, but they cannot close completely, because if they close, all the blood that is coming from the lower part of the body is not going to go to the heart. So there is always certain areas where the filter cannot entertain all the clots, and they go to the lungs. In this case, I found the clots into the lungs, and I dissected both legs, and I found multiple thrombi in multiple vessels of both legs.
Are you able to provide an opinion as to the manner of death here, Dr. Ortiz?
The manner of death is homicide. I put homicide because all these complications were secondary to the impact on the head that was secondary to punching him on the face.
No further questions at this time.
Thank you. Counselor, cross-examination.
Yes. Doctor, how are you, sir?
Very good, sir.
Good. You had an opportunity to make the opinion that's been offered. What exhibit is it?
6.
Exhibit 6, the autopsy report. That's your report, correct?
Yes.
And you relied on looking at the records from Providence Hospital. You testified to some of the history of Mr. Wegson. That was from looking at the records from Providence Hospital?
Yes.
Okay. And you got an opportunity to look at all those records, correct?
Yes.
And you use those to help make your determination, correct?
Yes, partly.
Okay. All right. So let me ask you first a couple basic questions. One, you know, I'm not as skilled in medicine as clearly as you would be, and we kind of all need to understand a little bit more basic here, okay? First, you said that there was, and I'm going to be really bad with words, so sometimes I'm probably going to spell it for you and let you say it or let you read it, okay?
Okay.
All right. You said that there was right or left. Which one is it? Was there damage to the right?
Right.
Right, what's it called?
Subdural hemorrhage.
Okay. So you're saying that there was right subdural hemorrhage, correct?
Yes.
And you're saying that that was the cause of death. That's not what you're saying, correct?
No, it is part of the complication.
All right. So there was you in your findings in your autopsy, you observed right subdural hemorrhage.
Yes.
Okay. Now let's talk a little. Mr. Wegson was a over 6 foot tall, about 250 pounds, correct?
Yes.
All right. And you went through his history, correct?
Yes.
All right. I'm going to show you what's been proposed as Exhibit E. And I'm going to direct you to where my finger is, okay?
Thank you.
Can you just let me know what you're showing the witness?
It's Exhibit E, and it's, I gave you a copy. I'm going to...
It doesn't say E in here anywhere.
Oh, I'm sorry. It would say... I'll show you right now. I pull it out over here. It would be... Sir, in Exhibit E, it says past medical history.
Correct.
Okay. And this is a document, this is a medical record from Providence that you viewed, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So, Judge, I'd move to admit Exhibit E.
Well, just because he's viewed it, I think
Well, you want to ask the next question? I already asked if you relied on them.
I'm not trying to be difficult, but this is, I believe what he's shown the doctor is a portion of the overall medical records. I don't mind if you use, which were not created by this doctor. It's not the entire record, it's a small snippet of just voluminous records. I don't mind if he questions him from it, but he, to admit it through this witness, with all due respect, isn't proper, because it's not his document.
Judge,
Say the objection.
exhibit, oh,
You can question it.
okay, exhibit 70, or Rules of Evidence 703 says if the expert relies on it, then, and then uses it in his determination, then it's admissible. But with that said, Judge, if the court...
I said he could fully question him. I'm not trying to limit him on that fashion, Your Honor.
And you may proceed with your question.
Okay. Sir, let's go through number 1. What is number 1? What does that say?
It says atrial fibrillation and uncommon
Okay. Arterial fibrillation is the size of a heart, correct?
No. Atrial fibrillation is where the heart pumps, not correctly, but a little bit fast.
Okay.
And when it does, that kind of function might create clots. And that is the reason they go in comating to avoid to have these clots to go to the brain.
Okay. So an arterial fibrillation is something that in fact makes, when you say what the grams, you weigh like the heart later, right? And in this situation, in your report, you weighed Mr. Wegson's heart to, I believe, 832 grams, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And the thing that leads to, you're going to have to say it for me,
Atrial fibrillation.
the thing that leads to arterial fibrillation is hypertension, correct?
No,
Is that one of the things?
it's part of it, but
Okay.
not the main.
All right. But you just said that this was a pre-existing condition that you knew of that Mr. Wigson had prior to this incident, correct?
Yes,
Okay. And it is something that actually causes blood clots, correct?
yes,
Okay. And it is something that leads to your heart weighing more than it should, correct?
no.
What should a heart weigh?
The heart usually weighs from 350, some depends the size of the person.
250 to
Was
350?
really tall person and heavy, the heart up to 400.
Okay.
So the heart is increasing size.
But a normal heart weighs around 250 to 350. Okay. And in this situation, Mr. Wigson's heart was 832, correct?
Yes,
Okay. So over 2 times, almost 3 times the weight it should have been, correct?
yes,
Okay. And you concluded that this was part of the reason that he passed, correct?
I did not say that.
Okay.
I said that there were complications, and I mentioned the findings in the heart because the complications were what killed this person, and mainly the pulmonary embolism, not the heart.
Sir, you wouldn't tie the damage to Mr. Wigson's heart to the punch, correct?
No,
Okay. So they're not connected. The punch is not connected to the heart being 2 to 3 times the weight it should be, correct?
correct.
All right. So next on the list, which was another pre-existing condition that Mr. Wigson had, is identified as PE, correct?
Yes, they
Okay.
talk about pulmonary embolism that probably they thought that he could have in the past.
Okay. Pulmonary embolism is another word for saying clot, blood clot, correct?
Correct.
But pulmonary embolisms are, in layman's terms, a way of saying blood clots in the lung area, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And I know I'm being more general, but this is so we can understand it, okay? So the pre-existing condition...
Objection as to the form of the question. There's no proof of a pre-existing condition of that nature.
Well, it's in his history here.
No, it doesn't say pre-existing condition.
Sir, when you looked...
Phrase your question.
Sir, when you reviewed Mr. Wegson's medical records, you became aware that he had a PE problem prior to him coming to the hospital for the punch, correct?
With all due respect, if he's going to try and question someone, he has to say something accurately. I will say that the document to just cut to the chase, there's not a jury here, the document he's provided to the witness says past medical history. The document was not something this doctor created, and it says in one point the initial PE. That doesn't say he has a pre-existing condition. It doesn't say whether it's true or not, but it just listed as a possible past medical condition, not a current, not a, he has to, my point is, if he's going to quote something, he has to quote it accurately. He can't phrase it differently.
I assume the doctor can testify to what he relied on and what his opinion was.
Thank you.
Sir, you understood from medical records after reading them that Mr. Wigson had a PE issue that existed prior to the punch, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So, PE stands, once again, sir?
Pulmonary embolism.
Okay. And pulmonary embolisms are blood clots in the lungs. So we can be clear, Mr. Wigson had an issue with blood clots in his lungs prior to this incident, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. The next thing, sir, is called the DVI.
No, this DVT.
Oh, see, I have actually a vision problem. Sorry for that, but DVT, okay?
DVT is deep vein thrombosis.
Okay, and deep vein thrombosis is also a way of, is a type of blood clotting, correct?
Yes.
Now this is blood clotting in what part of your body?
I don't know what kind of part of the body, because some people, when they say deep, refers in pelvis or in legs.
Yeah, but the lower part of the body, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So now, and you were aware from reading the medical records that Mr. Wigson had a DVT diagnosis prior to the punch, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And now this in layman terms means that Mr. Wigson had a problem with blood clotting from his hips down prior to the punch, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, blood clotting goes from bottom to top, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so a bleed in the brain or a clot, bleeding and clotting are the same thing, correct?
Yes.
Okay. A bleed in the brain or a clot in the brain won't go down, correct?
No.
Okay. Sir, did you learn that prior to this incident, so we also can be clear, prior to the punch, the victim unfortunately had suffered from both now blood clotting in the lungs, blood clotting in the legs, correct?
Yes.
All right. Now you also learn from the medical records that the injury when Mr. and did you? If you didn't learn from them, please tell me, sir. I don't mean to assume you did if you didn't, okay? But from the injuries that the punch caused initially, the injury that the punch actually caused was injury to the left subdural hemorrhage, correct?
Right.
Okay,
So right, correct, or right side? I just want to be clear here.
It's in the right side.
okay. So, in your opinion, not what may have killed him. What killed him may have been, strike that. Sorry. What caused him to die may have been the right subdural hemorrhage. That's what you saw in your autopsy, correct?
Yes.
Okay. But when we look at the reports, and I'll bring you Exhibit D. May I approach, Judge?
May.
Could I just ask what he's showing the witness?
Oh, I'm sorry. That's fair. I'm showing him what would be. May I approach? 6. Nope. I'm showing what would be 4 on your side.
You can't walk
this
in.
way. Yeah, I shouldn't have came this way. Sorry.
Thank you.
So I'm gonna go back to the podium, okay? So I'm giving you that.
And what is it marked?
It is marked. Can I see it one more time? Your Honor, it's marked D.
D, thank you.
As proposed as in D.
Judge, some observation that I have here.
Dave, you have to wait for questions.
Okay.
Hold on one second.
May the witness have a moment to review what he's been handed, Your Honor?
Of course. But
Because it's more than a couple of pages, so.
it's 2 pages, no problem.
Okay, what question do you have?
Okay. Sir, reviewing Exhibit D, this is also another record that was that you reviewed. It's a summary prepared by Providence Hospital. It was the first 2 pages of all the medical records. You reviewed this, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And this is part of what you used to make your determination, correct?
No.
Well, did you look at it prior to?
I look at it, but my determination is about the findings that I have at the time I examined the body.
Okay. So is it fair to say that your findings, is it fair to say that the findings of the hospital would be a better representation of what happened to the victim than the findings post-death?
Well, in this case, Your Honor, what happened is that I examined the body, and at the time I examined the body, of course, the person is dead, and I go inside, and I see and I report what I found. For instance, in this case, there was the subdural hemorrhage, there was bronchopneumonia, pulmonary edema, pulmonary thrombosis of the veins, and all the findings that I have there. So this way I do my opinion, together with the information that the police gave to me, the whereabouts, how did the injury occur, and occasionally I read the medical records if the findings that we want to see have disappeared, because after a month there is healing, and sometimes disappear certain things. But I report what I find in the body, not what somebody else has found because I don't have a proof. If I come to court and they tell me something that I cannot prove, it's not right. So I have to put what I find in order to give my opinion or whatever.
But, sir, isn't it important that you know the medical history to help you figure out what your conclusion is on the cause of death? Because you're not just saying what you found, you're actually making the connection that what happened on early August, is what caused Mr. Wegson's death in early September. You're
Right.
making that determination.
And the reason of this is that
Sir, could...
Wait, you've got to let the witness answer the question. That's only fair.
I don't know if it's very
For
responsive.
the witness.
Okay. Sir, your determination is to led to a conclusion that the punch that occurred in early August led to Mr. Wegzin's death, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So, isn't it important to know the medical treatment and the diagnoses that took place from the punch until the autopsy?
In general, it is, but as I was explaining to the judge, I give my opinion regarding what I find. Because what happened during the month of hospitalization, I didn't have hands-on to see what was going on. I got at the end when the person died. And that is the reason I put all the complications that I saw. Because all these complications wouldn't be there if he was not punched and had a fall. Otherwise, he was not having no problem with
Your Honor, I appreciate,
prior to the incident.
Judge, I appreciate the doctor's narrative, but
Objection.
I-
He keeps interrupting the witness.
Because
This is
they're
a
not-
very-
You
this-
did ask him a question.
but it was a narrative response, and I guess I'll
Wait a second. Your Honor, he asked the
It was a
question.
yes and no
I don't
question,
care who the
Judge.
witness is, but this is a doctor, you're a judge. I mean, we're all professionals here, or should be. Allow the witness to ask the question.
I
If you
don't
don't like the answer, don't interrupt the witness.
I don't mind the answer, Judge. The only problem is it's just the exam will go on further.
At this point, put another question before your witness.
Okay. Sir, I understand that your role as a doctor is just to be a doctor and do certain things, and please don't take the questions that I'm asking as a way to, it's just to learn what happened, okay? I'm not trying to attack you.
Counsel, get to a question.
Okay. Sir, looking at Exhibit D, can you read out loud the first 4 sentences?
I don't believe Exhibit D's been admitted.
It does not, Your Honor. He can try and impeach the witness with it. I've already, like the last exhibit, it's not a record he created. He can, I'm allowing for the exam a limited purpose, but it hasn't been admitted. You're correct.
First, I'll move to admit it.
It's not a foundation. It's not a full record. It's a two or three pages of a voluminous body of work that was not created by this witness.
Judge, that's not the case at all. In fact, it's 2 pages, and it is the beginning end. It is signed by the hospital, and it was part of the records that were provided to me by prosecution, and it is part of the records that Mr. The doctor reviewed prior to making his conclusions in the autopsy report.
The doctor said he made his findings in this case based upon what he saw at autopsy. Your Honor, the doctor who's on the witness stand did not create this document. If Mr. Defense Counsel wishes to call the author of this report, that's his choice, but this is not the author of the report.
Judge, I don't believe the rules of evidence require that.
If you look at 703, it allows, and it doesn't say it allows a document to be admitted, but if the court can hear evidence, facts or data which the expert relies on for his opinion, and he's indicated that this is not what he relied on.
Well, Judge, 703 says expert opinion can be based on any information made or known to the expert before trial. The information need not be admissible for it to be normally relied upon. 702.
And that's why you're questioning him about it.
No problem. Sir, did you learn, I'll read it, that this happened at Providence prior to, soon after Mr. Wegzin arrived at the hospital?
Objection. What happened at Providence?
Sir, did you ever know that there was that the hospital found a left, instead of right? You said it happened on the right, correct? It's what's it called? What's the damage to, what is it called, sir?
About the subdural
Subdural hematoma. Did you learn that the hospital found a left subdural hematoma?
Let me check my record because I have to hold on to this.
Sir, can I see what documents
You
you're
have to
looking at?
let him, are you looking at the autopsy document?
Yes, and I have to go and see back part of the examination, because in my examination, when the neuropathologist that sees the brain, cut the brain, he said in the left side, and now called my attention that there is a typographical error here, that instead of saying left, see, and I will direct you to read, it's in the left side,
Okay.
and I said in the right side,
Okay.
but it says here in the left side.
Well, sir, your report actually says left and right, but we'll get to that. What my question is right now, in reviewing the medical records, which you have gone to and you have in front of you from Providence Hospital, correct?
Yes?
So you brought those medical records with you, correct?
No?
How did you get all those records that are in front of you that you're looking at?
Your Honor, defense counsel just handed the doctor 2 pages. So
Oh,
that's...
no, he had his own
He
document.
gave me the pages, this.
Okay. And what else is in front of you that you're referring to, sir?
This is part of the police report that I have, that he went to the hospital, and I don't have a medical record that you are showing me there.
Okay, so sir, the records say that there was a left subdural interhemispheric hemorrhage. That is the same thing as a left subdural hematoma, correct?
Yes?
Okay, so when Mr. Wegsig came to the hospital after the night after the punch, that's what the CAT scan showed, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and you looked at that and saw that in the records, correct?
No, in the records during the examination of the body.
Okay, so this existed as a result of the punch, correct?
Yes?
Okay, and the medical records only show that this left subdural hemorrhage or hematoma, same thing, existed was a result of the punch, correct?
Yes.
Okay, now let's go to your autopsy report. Sir, if you could go to page, it looks like it's page 93, it's identified as 93.
No, page 3 of 9.
Okay.
You look at the upper right-hand corner.
Okay. Looking at page 3 of 9, and you go to the paragraph, evidence of injury,
Yes?
and you go to the third line,
Yes?
it says there are old healing contusions on the left hemisphere. Correct?
Yes?
Okay. So, in your autopsy, you saw this injury to the left hemisphere, which was the hematoma or hemorrhage on the left side, correct?
Yes?
Okay. And you noted in your autopsy report that there was old healing contusions, correct?
Yes?
Okay. So your autopsy, your conclusion was that that injury that was sustained to the left hemisphere of the brain, the hematoma on the left side, that was healing, correct?
Yes?
Okay. Sir, in your autopsy report, you observed first clots in the vena cava. Is that how you say that? V-E-N-A-C-A-V-A, correct?
Yes?
Okay. Clots in the vena cava, is that the chest, like the breastbone area?
No, it's at the middle of the chest if you are reading vena cava.
Okay. So the clots that you found in the vena cava were not clots that could have came from the brain, correct?
No.
Okay. But you did observe those in the deceased's body, correct?
Yes.
Okay. You also observed clots in the pulmonary, the PEs. You observed PE clots, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
What is he referring is a little bit misleading. If he reads the
Sir,
whole...
Your Honor, I'd
You
ask
have
the...
to wait for a question.
Oh, sorry.
Sir, you also observed clots in the lungs, the PE, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And these clots in the PE that you observed, there are several, correct? PE clots.
Yes.
Okay. Now, the vena cava problem in the PE, the clots that you observed in those two areas which you identified in your autopsy, these were areas that Mr. Wigson had a problem getting clots in prior to the punch, correct?
Partly according to the medical history that you showed me.
Okay. Well, it wasn't that I showed you, it was that the prosecutor provided you, correct?
No, you gave me this part that says PE. You remember that we were talking about PE?
Yeah, but these are the Providence records. You reviewed these.
The reason you mention it. And in my report, I described that the inferior vena cava had a Greenfield filter. They put this because he was having some problems in clotting.
Okay, sir.
So, the one that is referring is that there are clots in the inferior vena cava, but are the one that are described here that is in the Greenfield filter. Okay? Inferior vena cava in page 4 of 9 of my autopsy protocol.
Sir, we'll get to your protocols and we'll get to your conclusions. But right now we're talking about the things you observed, okay?
Okay.
Okay. So we just went through the clots you saw in the vena cava, the clots you saw in the lungs, and now there is also clots in the legs, correct?
Yes.
Okay. The clots in the legs, they are the, what are thrombi vessels?
Yes, called thrombi in the vessels.
Okay.
And it's in page 4 of 9 in the last 2 lines.
Okay. And you also saw blood clots there, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So there were blood clots which you observed in your autopsy in the bottom part of Mr. Wigson's body, the middle part of in two areas in the middle parts of Mr. Wigson's body, correct?
I describe only in the vessels of the legs.
Well, the legs, the lungs, and the vena cava, correct?
Correct.
Okay, those three separate areas, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And none of them could have come down from... You described these clots as multiple. So we're not talking there was one in the legs, one in the vena cava, one in the lungs. You saw multiple, correct?
Yes.
Okay. The actual cause of death was 2 clots in the PE area in the lungs, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Sir, you agree that the medical records show no evidence of the CAT scans that you reviewed, if you reviewed them. And if you didn't review them, tell me you didn't review the CAT scans.
No.
But,
I did not review them.
okay, did you review the notes, the radiology notes on the CAT scans that were in the medical records?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Well, then, in reviewing any of the records that you did review, are you aware that there existed no right...
Objection. The way he phrases the question presumes something which is not in evidence.
Okay.
So you have to rephrase that to make a proper question.
I don't
You can proceed with
confuse sometimes. Sir, everything that you read, did you ever view or observe or learn that soon after the punch occurred, or within a week or so, or when they did CAT scans or originally came to the hospital, that there was any evidence of a right hematoma or hemorrhage to the I can't mess up the words because it's important for on the record. What's it called, sir? Subdural hematoma on the right side.
Yes, subdural hematoma.
Okay. Did you ever learn that the punch caused a subdural hematoma to the right side?
No, and the reason of this is that the reason I was explaining is not the same reading on record like opening it. We open the head and we see, and the neuropathology comes and see, oh, there is some subdural hemorrhage. But the CT scan or MRI, they don't show it.
Okay.
That's the reason sometimes we call the radiologist, where did you see it? And they come and say, oh, we saw here, but there's nothing.
Okay.
So it's completely different opening the head and seeing what is in there than reading something that is only shallow.
Okay. So, sir, are you saying that a CAT scan is not... There's situations where a CAT scan can't view a subdural hematoma?
Yes, we have seen those that sometimes they said, and we don't find it.
Okay. So, what test, other than a CAT scan, would you say should be used to see a subdural hematoma?
Well, I don't practice neurosurgery to know those things. If you want to something in that matter, you can call a neuropathologist or a neurosurgeon to say, because I don't practice, I don't order testing. We as I was saying, we see and open the head. That's the reason we refer to what we find. We don't challenge what they didn't find or not. We report what we see.
So, help me conclude then. Was there a right subdural hematoma and a left one, or is it a mistake? Was there just a right one or just a left one? When you opened it up.
According to the report, it says was residual hemorrhage in the right side, and on the left side there was also, because it was in both sides actually.
Okay.
When the brain was examined.
Okay. So at the time of autopsy, you believe there was one on the right and one on the left. Is that what you saw?
Yes.
Okay. And at the time of autopsy, the one on the left was healing, correct?
All of them were healing because after a few weeks after surgery, after the trauma, the body tends to heal. That is the way healing changes.
Okay, so it's fair to say, sir, that what a subdural hematoma ultimately is like you get hit, it's kind of like a swelling of your brain in blood, correct? Inside. Is that true or no?
Subdural hemorrhage is a bleeding of the vessels that connect to the brain from the dura.
Okay.
And there is nothing to do with the brain itself. It's part of the blood that is coming from the vessels and is making the brain to be displaced.
So what you're saying was at the time of the autopsy, there was evidence that the subdural hematomas in the right or the left were healing, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So now let's go to the summary in your report where it talks about pathological diagnosis. What does pathological diagnosis mean?
It's a summary of the pathological findings or abnormalities during the examination.
Okay. So the first one listed, and these are what you're using to rely on the determination that Mr. Wegson died from a punch, correct?
I didn't say from the punch, it's complication.
Okay. These are the complications you're listing, correct?
Yes.
Okay. That you believe translate to the punch causing the death of Mr. Wigson.
Yes.
Okay. The first one you identify as subdural hemorrhage, correct?
Yes,
That is the hemorrhages or hematomas we were talking about on the right and the left, correct?
correct.
Okay. But there is evidence that those were healing, correct?
Yes.
Objection, that's been asked and answered several times now.
The status post-craniotomy. That, again, was the craniotomy used to take out the blood, the hemorrhaging in the left and right, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So, brain contusion, sir, what's that?
It's like an impact in the brain.
Okay. Are you saying that so it's like a bruise in the brain, correct?
Sort of, yes.
Okay. And bruises heal, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Were the bruises in Mr. Wiggson's brain during the autopsy, did they look like they were healing?
I described in page 6 of 9 and the central nervous system that there are hemorrhagic contusions.
And you said they were healing, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Then you have bronchopneumonia, right? That's basically pneumonia. Can you say that word for me?
Bronchopneumonia.
Okay, that's pneumonia, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And sir, if we go back to exhibit I believe is D.
With all due respect, Your Honor, there has not been an admission of
All right,
Exhibit
fine.
D, so to refer to it as such,
No problem.
it would be inappropriate.
No problem. Sir, were you aware that at the time that Miss
Explain to you.
caused So, but just to get my question answered, you're not aware whether or not when Mr. Wigson was admitted to the hospital the night of the punch or the day after a CAT scan was done and pneumonia was found?
No.
Okay. Sir, what is hydrothoracis?
Hydrothoracis is accumulation of fluid in the chest cavities.
Okay. Sir, is this something that someone with a AFib history would have?
No.
Okay. What causes this?
Cardiac insufficiency.
What is cardiac
When the
insufficiency?
heart is not working properly, because of the failure to pump, fluid is going to retain in the lungs. When
Okay.
the lungs are retaining too much fluid, it tends to come out and go into the cavities. And it's one of the signs of congestive heart failure. It's also due to being in bed, the poor heart that he had, and because the condition that he was developing this congestive heart failure.
So
And that's the reason I put those hydrothoraces, because I found them.
So, sir, you just said he had a poor heart, correct?
Yes.
And his poor heart, you're aware, existed prior to the punch, correct?
Objection, no. I'll move along.
So, and you learned that from the medical records, correct?
From examining the heart.
Okay. All right. And you were aware he was on medication, Coumadin, correct for that?
I read here when the papers that you showed me.
Okay. From examining the heart, you saw that the heart was what what conclusions did you make about the condition of the heart from seeing you?
Is what I wrote here, that was hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. I put hypertrophic cardiomyopathy because of the size of the heart, increase in size of the heart.
Can you turn that into layman's terms for me? Can you tell me what that means?
Large heart.
Okay. And is large heart created to be large by hydrothorasis?
Yes, it could give that hydrothoracis too.
Okay. So the hydrothoracis that you list as a complication is connected to the large heart, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And we agree that the large heart was well, we talked about it earlier, but it was, from looking at the large heart, that was something that's been there for a while, correct?
Yes.
Okay, this wasn't something that was developed in a month, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Did you actually see contusions or things that evidence prior heart surgeries?
No.
Sir, finally, number 8, well, not finally, but number 8 is a pulmonary embolism due to throbbing in vessels of both legs. Correct?
Yes.
Can you say that out loud so I make sure I got the words right?
Pulmonary embolism due to thrombi in both legs.
Okay. So what you're saying there is that the pulmonary embolisms that caused Mr. Wiggson's death came from his legs, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And this was the same type of pulmonary embolisms that we discussed Mr. Wigson had prior to the incident, correct?
Probably not as heavy as this one that I found, because if he had this kind of pulmonary embolism before, he could be dead a long time ago. Might be just small fragments that almost everybody has a small fragment going to the lung, but nature gives the power to dissolve it. Some people have a little enlarged, that is reason they start giving more treatment like human, like in this case.
Mr. Wigson was likely susceptible to PEs, correct? Based on everything you observed in his autopsy. He had clots everywhere, correct?
He had clots in the lungs and in the legs.
Okay. And even to the point where a Greenfield filter was put in, correct?
Yes.
To stop them from going to the brain, correct?
No, to the heart.
Okay, so it was put in at the vena cava to stop them, correct? It's like a filter that stops clogs, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So, all the things we correct?
This is the complications that I found.
All right. The second cause, it looks like a second cause that you list as, is that, well, you have a number 2 here, and it looks like it to be a second cause of death, correct?
No, it is a pathological diagnosis. It's the findings that I got. Is a large heart. That's the reason I put hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, that in layman word is big heart, huge heart.
Okay. So, sir, when you list 1 and 2 under pathological diagnosis, isn't pathological diagnosis this is what I learned from my autopsy that I believe led to his death? Isn't that what you mean there?
No, those are the findings that I got during the examination of the body.
Yeah, but you do more than make a finding, correct? You make a conclusion that the punch caused, the trauma from the punch caused the death. You do more than just make findings, right, sir?
I think you have to rephrase this question. And the reason is that the cause of death, as I said, were complications of the blunt force head trauma that this person had. Pathological diagnosis is the findings of what the dead person showed at the time of examination.
What was the punch? Confu 1 to 8, I'm not going to read them all. Is there anything besides 1 to 8 in your report that you believe helped you conclude that the blunt force head trauma and complications thereof caused Mr. Wiggson's death?
Correct.
Is there anything else?
No.
Okay. Sir, the second thing that you list, because one is blunt force head trauma caused death. The second thing that you list, number 2, is hypertrophic cardiopathy. Correct?
Yes.
Okay. So this is a second thing that you're listing that could have been a cause for Mr. Wiggson's death. Correct?
The reason there is that I have to put everything that I found.
Fair.
But in the
Sir.
May I respond to explain to the judge?
Let him answer the question,
Responsive,
please.
Thank you. He's already answered this question many times. I could probably tell him what he's going to say.
Okay.
So let's move on.
So, well, Judge, I didn't get an answer yet, but I'll
What is it that you need to know that we haven't heard of?
what I want to know is, number 2, in his report, is he saying that that is a also possible cause of death of Mr. Wigson?
This is present at the time of my examination, and the increased size of the heart is not part of the complication because this takes years to have it.
Okay.
The dead heart, who knows how long did he have it, but it's not part of the complications.
I
It was
agree.
there, and of course, everything and anything that is in the body is going to be reported.
That talks about blunt force head trauma, okay? Blunt force head trauma is 1, complications is A, and then complications is titled as A, and then 1 through 8 are the listed complications.
Yeah.
Okay. Then, completely separate, you list 2, correct?
Yes.
Roman numeral 2, and you identify that as?
This has been asked and
Thank
answered.
you, Counsel. I have heard this so many times.
Okay.
He's answered
And
your
it's already
question.
admitted.
Maybe
But-
you don't understand.
No, Judge.
But he's answered this
He
question.
hasn't answered the simple question is, Judge, he keeps saying it's part of the complications. Sir, you identified everything you found in your autopsy report, correct?
Yes.
And you put these specific physical descriptions throughout the 9 pages of your report, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And then you identify the last page as your diagnosis, correct? Is for trauma, correct?
Correct.
And the other one is hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And hypertrophic.
Further, counsel?
And
Anything that defense counsel said in this examination, doctor, change your opinion? Do you still agree, in other words, that the victim died of blunt force head trauma and complications thereof in relation to the punch? Do you still agree with that?
Yes.
And do you still agree that this is a homicide?
Yes.
And as you were listed, item 2 on page 8 of 9 for your report, the cardiomyopathy, that's just listed because that exists within the body, correct?
Correct.
You're not saying that the heart killed him in this case, are you?
No.
Thank you. No further questions.
Thank you. You may step down.
Judge, may I ask you one question?
You may.
Sir, can you say that it is likely that Mr. Wigson could have passed from, let's write that. Can you tell me, without a doubt, that the PE blood clots that caused his death were not from his condition of getting clots pre-existing the punch?
As I said before, the pulmonary embolism that I found was severe, large, and I believe that it was secondary to the long range of being in bed that complicated that. Before that, he had some pulmonary embolism that was treated. This pulmonary embolism, should it be prior to the punch, the person could have died years ago.
Okay.
That was one question.
Thanks, Judge.
Thank you. And you may step down.
Thank you.
Your Honor, with the admission of exhibits 1 through 6, and I know the defense had 3 or 4 admitted, I would rest.
Thank you. Any witnesses on behalf of the defense?
Judge, I don't believe I have any witnesses. No.
Thank you. Then counsel argument?
Yes, thank you very much, Your Honor, and thank you for your patience today. The people have moved to bind the defendant over as charged in this matter. Quite frankly, we've shown very clearly that the defendant came up to an unarmed victim who was standing defenseless in a street. The victim was speaking to a uniformed police officer in a marked patrol car. The officer was 8 to 10 feet away from the victim face to face. The defendant comes up alongside. The defendant has to walk past the entire length of the patrol vehicle. Then he's momentarily or briefly at the side of a uniformed police officer while the officer is speaking to the victim. And the defendant, in his rage, then charges at the victim with a very hard blow, strikes him in the most vulnerable portion of his body with such force, such strong force, that the victim is unable to, falls back and injures himself further on the cement. So quite frankly, we've heard from the medical examiner ad nauseum and supported by the exhibits that this has led to his death. This is a homicide. The charge at the minimum is involuntary manslaughter, and we ask that you bind it over as charged, and then the misdemeanors would follow.
Thank you. Counsel argument.
Your Honor, first I would argue that there is not sufficient evidence or enough to get probable cause on the issue of whether or not Mr. Dante assaulted anyone. The reality here is that Dante was the victim. And the evidence presented so far was, in fact, that the injuries to Mr. Wegson all didn't come from the punch from the officer's testimony. The officer's testimony is he fell on his back, and when he fell on his back, he didn't get injured anywhere else. And Mr. Wegson, unfortunately, Judge, has injuries to his knuckles, injuries to his, from the testimony, injuries to the right and left side of his face, injuries to his elbow, all injuries that can't be accounted for. So, Judge, we don't try victims. Next, which is most important, if the judge wants to conclude that there's an issue of fact in regards to the assault, there clearly is no issue of fact in my reasonable view of all the medical records and the testimony of the medical examiner, Judge, because you can't connect the punch to the death. You can't do it. You can't do it, one, because of time. But more importantly, the medical science doesn't go there. Every time you ask the medical examiner, the very simple question was, hey, what was the injury that the punch caused? The injury the punch caused was damage to the left hemisphere of the brain. Was a bleeding in the left side of the brain. Okay? Great. What does your autopsy report say in regards to that? The autopsy report says that the damage, the bleeding to the left side of the brain was healing. The medical examiner's testimony is, even if there was a right side hemorrhage that the CAT scans didn't see, he said both the right and the lefts were healing. So if my client punches Mr. Wegson and the punch causes bleeding to the hemisphere, the left or right side of the brain, but the autopsy report evidences that that healed, then how do we reasonably or in any way conclude that that thing that healed caused the death of Mr. Wegson? But you don't even have to go there. You get to go even further, Judge, because not only did where the punch hit heal, but the medical examiner has identified that what caused the death was a PE, a blood clot in the chest. That blood clot in the chest couldn't have come from the head. That blood clot in the chest was a pre-existing condition that Mr. Wegson unfortunately had prior to the punch. That blood clot is clearly identified as what caused Mr. Wegson to die in the lungs. It is also identified that it came from the legs to the lungs, according to the medical examiner. There is no testimony that there was any contusions, bruising, or anything done by Mr. Wegson to the legs or to the chest. So, Judge, not only is there a prior condition of this, but everything shows that what happened to the PE, the clots in the PE, couldn't have come from the punch. Then, Judge, we even get to go a step further. And what's identified as, well, he doesn't, the medical examiner doesn't say whether his diagnosis 1 or 2 was more likely to cause the death, but he lists 2 diagnoses. The first one, we went through every complication. None of those complications are connected to the punch. Every one of them, without going through them, the medical examiner testified were the subdural hematoma was the first one, number 1, but he said those 2 healed. The craniotomy, he said that was for fixing the hemisphere issues, and that the hemisphere issues healed. So, and the rest of them, Judge, had nothing to do with the punch. And then he lists a second cause that has to do with a large heart. He not only lists this as a cause, but he says that this is a problem that Mr. Wegson's had for years. He says that he actually did physical observations and weighing of the heart And unfortunately, Mr. Wegson's heart was 2 to 3 times larger than what it should have been. And he listed that as something that he testified that that's something that couldn't have been from a punch. And he listed that as on his diagnosis for what could have caused Mr. Wegson's death. Simply put, Judge, if the medical examiner can't tell us that the punch or the subdural hematomas in the head led to the other things, and in fact he's telling us the opposite, that the brain injuries couldn't lead down, and he can't tell us whether it was the large heart or it was the prior PE issues or a current PE issue that caused the death, then Judge, we don't meet the burden here and we don't get to make the connection. I would argue, Judge, that there's no probable cause in regards to the fact that the element that's necessary
and to say that there's not probable cause that the defendant assaulted the victim is just as ridiculous as the arguments defense counsel makes about not having probable cause about the medical examiner's opinion. Clearly it's all related. It's a homicide. That opinion's never wavered. If the court has any specific questions, I can go through this bit by bit, but I know you paid close attention. You're experienced. Thank you. I asked it to be bound over as charged.
Well, thank you. The record should reflect that the court has had the opportunity to hear the testimony of the witnesses and observe the exhibits that were admitted into evidence. We've heard the testimony of Officer Nichols indicating that he was called to the scene, that while he was speaking with Mr. Wegson at the scene, a few feet away from them, up came Mr. Nederveld from the side, gave him a strong punch and knocked Mr. Wegson to the ground. So I don't think there's any question that there was some action taken here by the defendant. We've heard the testimony of the medical examiner indicating that this wasn't, his findings were in fact that this was a homicide, that the defendant died of the blunt force head trauma and the complications that were sustained from it. We've heard counsel make some arguments about the two categories of findings, and I think the doctor was clear that these were not two causes of death. These were findings that were listed. The first were the findings of the complications. In there, in my mind, is clearly sufficient probable cause to bind the matter over to circuit court, and I will do so.
Thank you, Your Honor. A couple of brief matters. May we retain our exhibits, please?
Thank you. I'll have our court officer return the exhibits.
Secondly, defense counsel had a diagram created with the first witness, and it's too late for that, but I just asked for a photocopy of that, if I may have a photocopy before he leaves the building today, so we can each have a copy of it.
Judge, I don't believe it's too late to mark it, just to make it simple.
Thank you. I've already made my ruling, but I'm happy to have the staff make a photocopy.
Thank you. And the last point is, Your Honor, does the court wish to address bond at all at this time?
Thank you. If the parties wish to address it, otherwise.
Well, the defenseless in front of a police officer. I mean, my goodness, I don't know if this court's ever experienced a case like this, but it's shocking to the conscience that someone would do such a hostile act knowing full well that there's a police officer already present at the scene. So if the court wishes, I can give the criminal record into the defendant's criminal prior history into the record. The guidelines are significant. I would note that the defendant has previously pled to aggravated assault. I can't speak for the court, but surely there would have been some jail time associated with that, given his record and the manner in which he committed this crime.
Thank you. Anything you wish to state?
Of course, Judge. This is opposing counsel's third time to request bond increases. I don't know why he does it over and over again, but addressing it now is similar to addressing it before. Nothing's changed between the last day we were in court and today. The charges haven't changed. In regards to a plea, it was a no contest plea, and I don't even know what the status of that plea is. I don't know if the court has set it aside, not set it aside. Clearly, opposing counsel is moving forward on under the same case number on a manslaughter charge. So with all that said, Judge, I would tell you very simply that bond's been addressed before. Mr. Nederveld has appeared for court every time. Mr. Nederveld has clearly hired me and wants to defend himself. There is no issue with him going anywhere. He is here today to deal and defend what the prosecutor is accusing him of.
Thank you. The record should reflect that I've had a chance to hear the statements in court today, and obviously the question about this is quite a serious, this is a very serious incident. There's no question about that. The purpose of setting a bond is to guarantee that someone would appear in court and also to protect the public. I am noting there's a recommendation for pretrial services which indicated that defendants should receive a cash surety bond in the amount of $25,000, and the court has already set that at $75,000 in excess of pretrial services. And in addition, on the court's own initiative, it's my understanding that Mr. Nederveld is on a GPS tether with numerous requirements of pretrial supervision, etc. And I don't believe that there are any new facts that were here today that the court hadn't heard on a previous